Thank you, Lee. Good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here. We really love this music, and I hope you do too. My dad was in the Pacific Theater in the Navy, and he would have been 87 this year. He instilled in my brother and I a real love for this generation and for this music. So it is really an honor for me, and I think it is for Kim as well, to continue to share the messages and the lovely, lovely tones that come from this generation. So we're going to ask you to sit back and relax, take a sentimental journey back with us, and then we'll sing one other song, and then we'll let you get on with your meeting this evening. Thank you.
Gonna take a sentimental journey, gonna set my heart at ease, gonna make a sentimental journey to renew old memories. Got my bag, I got my reservation, spent each dime child in wild anticipation. I long to hear that all aboard. 7, that's the time we leave at 7. I'll be waiting up in heaven, counting every mile of railroad track that takes me back. Never thought my heart could be so yearning. Why did I decide to roam? Gonna take a sentimental journey, sentimental journey home. 7, that's the time we leave at 7. I'll be waiting up in heaven, counting every mile of railroad track that takes me back. Never thought my heart could be so yearning. Why did I decide to roam? Gonna take a sentimental journey, sentimental journey home.
And you can imagine a 20-piece band with us. That's pretty powerful. Nothing against the piano and me alone, but it's really incredible when you can hear this with all the horns and the trumpets and the saxophones and the drums. And it's an incredible, incredible sound. This one was actually a special request by our speaker, so hopefully this is something that speaks to a lot of you as well as you think back into maybe that somebody special from 60 or 70 years ago, if you're a product of that generation and you think fondly back about maybe somebody you left behind. This is I'll Be Seeing You.
Cathedral bells were tolling, and our hearts sang on. Was it the spell of Paris, or the April dawn? Who knows if we shall meet again? But when the morning chimes ring sweet again,
the Scottish Rite Cathedral, Sunday the 14th of April at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. HersheyCommunityChorus.org is the website to go to buy tickets, or you can see Lee in the hall during your break. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that preview. Just a couple of other things here quick before we get started. Anybody that would like to get on our email list or have a postcard mailed to you for notification of our meetings, please see Steve, where? Charlie Lloyd, he has his hand raised. See him after the meeting and he'll get you signed up. Just a little piece about next month's speaker. I'm going to read it directly from my little cheat sheet here. His name is Don Miller, noted World War II author and history professor. Miller was writer and chief historical consultant for World War II in HD, a 10-hour series that aired on the History Channel in November 2009, and was the network's most watched program in the fall season. Narrated by Emmy Award winner Gary Sinise, the series was inspired by Miller's book, The Story of World War II. Miller also appeared as an on-camera expert on PBS's American Experience program, The Bombing of Germany. The one-hour documentary premiered in February of 2010 and was based in part on Miller's book, Masters of the Air, America's Bomber Boys Who Fought the Air War Against Nazi Germany. And also there's another notation here, could be a possibility as far as a speaker. Wilfred Martini, German Army veteran who lives in Canada, will visit Hershey in May or June and has agreed to speak. Okay, tonight's speaker is Frank Lashinsky, a B-24 tailgunner who was shot down twice. When he was helped by the partisans once, wasn't so lucky the second time around, he was captured by the Germans on his second incident. So, please give a round of applause for Frank Lashinsky.
I guess I'm here. I'd like to give some statistics to start out with. Flying was a very dangerous occupation back in those days. In fact, in training, I have some numbers here. In the United States, there were, from August of December 41 through August of 45, the U.S. Army forces lost 14,903 pilots, aircrew, and assorted personnel, and 13,873 planes here in the United States. Ferrying planes overseas, there were 1,000 lost just ferrying them overseas. And there was, as I said, about 14,000 casualties here. And during aerial combat in Europe, there was about 5,500 casualties over there. But besides the two bailouts, we had two other experiences that were dangerous, I guess. We picked up a brand new airplane in Topeka, Kansas, B-24, and we flew from there to Greenfield, New Hampshire, then to Newfoundland, and then to the Santa Maria and the Azores. And that flight from Newfoundland to the Azores was kind of like the final exam for our navigator. If he got us there, he passed. And that was the first time when we were in the halfway point, he came on the intercom and announced, we've passed the point of no return, so we didn't have enough fuel to get back to where we came from. And we didn't have any things like GPSs or that type of navigation. The navigator had to use a sextant, and he had to go up and they had a bubble in the top of the aircraft there, take a reading in the sun, go through his charts, make some calculations, and give us a course of flying. But anyway, we made it to the Azores, and then we flew from there to Marrakech in Africa, and from Marrakech we flew to Tunis, and I was watching the right landing gear. I always, when we landed, we were over the Bombay, and there was a little wind out of the side of the plane, and I was watching the wheel touch down. I kind of enjoyed that. I don't know why. As it touched down, we had a very nice, smooth landing, and suddenly I saw the wheel started to wobble, and the whole thing, and then the plane, the whole landing gear just ripped out of the plane. The wing dropped down. Two of the propellers were torn out of the right-hand side, the two engines on the right-hand side. The wheel went back and hit the vertical stabilizer on the B-24 and knocked that completely off. We went skidding across the off the runway into the dirt, and finally came to halt. Fortunately, no one was injured, but the plane was a total wreck. And I have documentation. I have a copy of the accident report, and in a way, everybody was learning their job, including Rosie the Riveter back in the United States. And the accident was attributed to incorrect heat treating of the strut. So in a way, I don't know if Rosie the Riveter was the first one to get us or not, but we lost that plane. We had to wait for the WAFs, the Women Air Force flyers to fly in the new B-24 for us, and we picked that up, and we left Tunis, and as we were flying over to Italy, a convoy was slightly off in the distance from us, and all of a sudden they started to fire at us. It was one of our own convoys. I don't know exactly what it was, but fortunately they didn't hit us. We landed and became part of the 15th Air Force, and I was assigned to the 455th Bomb Group, was all the crew. I think there's a photograph up there. That's our crew right there. I'm the one on the front, kneeling down there, and our pilot, the co-pilot, and the navigator up in the back. Our pilot name was Richard J. von Schriltz. We used to kid him about that. He was the oldest, no, he wasn't the oldest man on the crew. The oldest man was our radio man, Walter Lips. He was 26 years old. When I landed overseas, I was still 19 years old. Within several weeks, I became 20. And we started flying and combat, and in the sixth mission, which was on the 14th of October, we were assigned to bomb the Odertal oil refinery up at the southern part of Poland, up near Auschwitz. There were two tall and a black hammer right in that same area. And the inmates of is it, can you hear me all right? Oh, okay. The older call in the Black Hammer refinery up there, and when we went up and bombed them, the Germans would use the inmates from Auschwitz to come out and clean up the damage and help put the units back into operation. We were flying tail end Charlie, the last plane in the whole group, and for whatever reason, I don't know, we couldn't keep up with the rest of our bomb group and squadron because the plane wasn't functioning correctly, and they pulled away from us, and we were all by ourselves now, about 800 miles inside Germany, and we had to find our way back by ourselves. And to make matters worse, the engines weren't functioning correctly, and we were losing altitude, so we had to strip out all of we threw overboard all of our ammunition. We stripped out all of the interior parts of our guns, threw anything overboard that we wasn't absolutely vital to keeping up in the air. And we finally, when we got down to, we had been up around over 20,000 feet. By the time we got down to around 10,000 feet or so, we were in an overcast or undercast, how you want to look at it. And we were no longer losing altitude, and so we're heading back to our base in Italy. Fortunately, we didn't have to worry too much about fighters because we were in the undercast, and we made a heading for our base in Italy. But as we flew, we noticed that because fuel consumption was high, that we would not be able to get to our base, and we had the Adriatic Sea between us and the Italy, so we made a decision that we would bail out over Yugoslavia, and in our headquarters building, they had a map on the wall that showed the fields of fire of all of the anti-aircraft guns over the targets that we were most likely to bomb. And in Yugoslavia, they had color-coded all the areas, different areas of Yugoslavia, depending on what the chances were of being picked up by friendly forces compared to hostile forces. So we picked out an area that was about 90% chance of being favorable of being picked up by friendlies. And I was the youngest on the crew, and the crew decided that maybe if I was left up there to be the last one, I wouldn't jump out, because we had never had any training at all in parachute jumping. We were issued a parachute. The first time I ever flew was in B-17, and when we got issued our parachute harnesses and our first parachute, and the instructor took us down, and that was the first time ever that I flew. And before we took off, I was talking to him and I asked him about having parachute training, and he said, nope. He said, you don't have to practice something, you have to have perfect the first time. and the only thing they told you was, if you're up at a very high altitude, above 10,000 feet, you needed oxygen. So there were little oxygen bottles in various stations of the airplane. You're supposed to grab one of those, and there's a little hose on it, and you would use that to get oxygen as you fell. But they said you should free fall until you're close to the ground before you open up your chute. But they never gave any instructions on how to tell when you were close enough and not too close. So anyway, with that training, incidentally, when I went into combat, I only had 80 hours of flying under my belt, and that wasn't unusual at the time, because I was only, in fact, in service 9 months before I was on my way overseas, and I jumped out first, and I pulled my ripcord. I remembered everybody saying, when you're talking about parachuting out, when you're back at the base, that when that parachute opens, there's a real hard jerk, and you really feel it. And in fact, the parachute harness, we had to go to a tailor, and he custom fitted everybody to their individual parachute harness to make sure that they didn't have any space in them, so when they opened up, they didn't, pulled up with a jerk and injured you. And I thought, gee, that wasn't much of a jerk. I didn't feel anything. I looked, and there was no parachute. So then I was surprised at myself that I could think as clearly at that time. I thought maybe I would have been too excited or something, but I started thinking, now what could the problem be? Then I had a backpack on that was sort of like a turtle shell, and I knew that they had the pins through a cone, and the pins came out when you pulled the ripcord, and I thought maybe some of those pins were bent. So I grabbed the ripcord with 2 hands and gave it a pull, and it sure did jerk when it opened up. I felt like I stretched a couple of feet, the taller, and when I came down into I thought I was coming down into a mountainside, but what it turned out, this area in Yugoslavia had a lot of sinkholes in it, and it looked like the mountainside was covered with fir trees, and I didn't want the fir tree to hit me in the face or between my crotch either, so I crossed my legs and covered my face, and when I hit very hard, and when I uncovered my face and I looked around, there wasn't a single fir tree around. What I had fallen into were ferns that must have been 5 or 6 feet high, and I was down underneath them. I couldn't even see anything until I stood up. And when I stood up and took off my flying helmet, I couldn't hear anything until I did that. When I did that, I could hear voices along the whole perimeter of the hole that I was in. So took the strap off of my .45, so I loosened it up, and I and I took off the safety and had it ready to fire, but I didn't take it out. I just left it in there, and I gingerly went up the slope of the sinkhole, and as soon as I got my head above the sinkhole, I saw a group of women and children that were running towards me, and I looked around to the other side, and coming from the other side there were a group of men with rifles in their hand running also towards me. So I thought I had to tell them who I am before they take a shot at me. And so I lined up between the women and children and the men so that they couldn't afford to take a shot at danger hitting some of their own. And I went up to the women and I said Amerikansky, and we have some slides. I think we'll show them at the end. There's a photographs of the identification card with the American flag on it. I don't know if you can find that in there. Okay. And I showed them that, and it had about the other side had about 6 different languages, one for each of the countries we might be landing in, and telling me to help me out because I'm American airman, and I showed them that. I don't know whether they could read or not, but they didn't change their expression on the face. And within a short period of time, though, the men were up there, and I said Amerikansky, and with that, one man put his hand out, started shaking my hand, and then everybody was shaking my hand. And he said something to the one woman. She was carrying a cloth bag, and she reached into the cloth bag and pulled out a little porcelain teacup like the young girls used to have in our days when they had the little tea sets, but it didn't have the little handle on it, just without a handle. She gave it to him, and then she reached in the bag again and pulled out an unlabeled green bottle with a cork in it. And she handed it to him, and we used to get 2 shots of old granddad if we wanted them after we came back from the mission, but I very seldom took mine because I didn't drink very much at that time. I used to sign them over, and my navigator would drink them for me. And, anyway, but this time I could stand one of those shots. So I went to reach out after he poured it, and he just ignored me, and he went. And he dragged it down, and then he poured the second one. And he gave it to me then, and I poured it down the way he did. And I was really glad that he drank that first one, because I would have swore they were poisoning me. You could feel it was like liquid fire. You could feel it all into the way it went down. It came around. And later on I found out that it was called Rakia. It's plum brandy is what it was. And it looked just like water. But anyway, there was some could speak a little English, and it was interesting because when I spoke English, the ones who spoke English either spoke with a British accent, or it sounded like with a Swedish accent, like they would use things like Yoko Yemeni, and I finally found out that a lot of these people had been over in Minnesota for a period of time. They came back to Yugoslavia, and that's where they learned to speak English. But they said to me, down in the valley there was a big German garrison, and that they probably saw me come down and be sending patrols up to search for me. So they said, we have to get out of here. So they quickly took me to a barn, and They had one other of our crew members that was already in the barn, and they were already making up a two-wheeled ox cart with one ox to pull it, and they had a load of hay on the back, and they told us to take off our flying clothing. They put it underneath the hay, and we sat on like the tailboard of the ox cart, and they sent a patrol of partisans is what it was, down, it was all dirt roads, and the partisans went down to the first curve, and another patrol went up on the high ground, and they would signal with their hands it was okay for us to travel ahead, and then they would leapfrog ahead of us and keep on doing it all the way. We did that for 3 days before we got to a town called Lashinsky Most. And Lashinsky Most was a safe town. It was in the mountains. Along the way, we passed a number of burned out German tanks and German trucks. I guess they had tried to attack it, and they were beaten off, and I guess they figured what the cost of taking it for whatever value they would get out of it. And when we got there, we could walk the streets, and all the Yugoslavs, from maybe about 15 or so boys and women to maybe, I don't know, as long as they weren't too old, they seemed to all be armed, and you'd see the women walking around with the ammunition belts down here and a couple of hand grenades hanging off of their waist, and most of the clothing that they wore was German uniforms, I guess, because they couldn't get regular clothing, so they just, when they needed something, they raided German warehouses or they killed Germans. I don't know how they got it, but that's what they mostly wore. And they put us up in a house. Within 3 days, the rest of our crew was gathered there. There were 45 American airmen in that house at that time, and the pilot, the co-pilot, and our bombardier had come from a different direction, and they ran across the partisans that were escorting them. Ran into a firefight with some Germans on the way to bringing them to Lashinsky Most. And in fact, they gave our co-pilot one of the Germans' ID, the dog tags, couldn't think of the word. We were assigned in this one house, and there was an older woman, and her 2 daughters were the housekeepers. They did the cooking and for the meals for us, and they were Muslims. They walked around with the veil on their face, and we were there maybe about a week or so when they took us out to a meadow right outside of town, and the British earlier had parachuted in a radio man with a radio set. He was set up in one of the houses in the attic somewhere, sending out whatever information they wanted to send out of there. And they took the radio out to the meadow. It was dark at this time, and soon we heard engines overhead, and he got on the radio, and he identified it as a friendly aircraft, and the partisans in the meantime had broken up into two groups, and they were about the width of a runway apart, and they spaced themselves about every 10 yards, and they had wooden torches, and when they sergeant's commander told them to light them up. They all lit them up. So, and they were the runway lights for the C-47 that came down and landed between them. And when as they passed each partisan, he extinguished the torch, so it was pitch black again. And the C-47 only held 21 passengers, so they took the wounded and injured first priority on board, and then they went by those who had been there the longest. I had to wait for the third trip. I was behind the enemy lines for 3 weeks before I finally got back. And then what was happening too was we were all sleeping on the floor on hay up in the second floor of that house. And the hay was crawling with lice, and so were we. And that was one of the recreations, was when you had nothing to do, just killing lice, popping them. And when we got back to, they took us back to Italy. We took us to Bury, to the hospital in Bury. And we went in the basement, and we took off all of our clothing and threw it right outside there. I'm pretty sure they burned it. And we went in, and we took a shower. And when we came out of the shower, there were medics there with flit guns. Everybody know what a flit gun is? Do you know what they are? You know, they had with the cannon and the air pump on. They were full of powdered DDT. And they told us to cover our face and keep our eyes and the mouth closed. And they covered it from head to toe with DDT powder. And then they gave us a pair of pajamas and led us up to the hospital ward. And we slept in that DDT all night long. The next morning we got up and took a shower. And we got new clothing, and they took us back to our base. And I had only been, I had a furlough before we went overseas. The furlough, we only were, there was a delay in run. We were given 10 days to get to the east, to our home, and then back to Topeka, Kansas from Pueblo, Colorado. And I only spent several days at home, but it was in August that I was at home. And now here in October, my parents were already getting a telegram that I'm missing in action in that short period of time. And when we, for whatever reason, I guess they kind of figured we were battle hardened or something, because they decided that we would now become a lead crew, and our pilot, co-pilot, and the navigator and the radio man got some extra training. We didn't get any. I was a tailgunner. We didn't get any training, but while they were being trained, we didn't fly any missions. And I didn't realize at the time that what was going to, by becoming the lead crew, we were now becoming the bullseye for where the flak guns were aimed. That's actually what happened, because I have some thing here that shows you what the flak in Vienna, the kind of flak turrets they had. They also had them, I know, in Berlin and Hamburg and some of the other large German cities. And those towers, I'm pretty sure a lot of the anti-aircraft guns were 85 millimeters, the famous German 88s. But they had either, I think, 105 or 125 millimeters in those turrets. And I found out that originally at the beginning of the war, they were using ordinary artillery shells to fire at us. But then they evolved into, they were trying to get proximity fuses but they never developed a good proximity fuse like we did. What they did do is they put some grooves in the shell so that they would explode into like pretty big pieces, and with that, their artillery, that flak became a lot more effective. But then they later on, toward the end of the war, they came out with artillery shells that were filled with incendiary pellets, and they were really, it was a good thing they only came out at the end of the war because they were extremely effective. Anyway, that's a little side part here anyway. But where was I before I sidetracked myself? What's that? Oh yeah. Well, we went back to flying, and we became a lead crew. So then we, as I said, we started flying the lead crew, and we on the February of 45, February 22nd, I believe it was, we were sent up to bomb the railroad marshalling yards in Vienna, Austria. Our targets were primarily, in all the missions that we flew in, were either oil refineries or railroad marshalling yards, because we were concentrating on keeping the Germans from having oil, and that was a very effective way of fighting, because that had the greatest effect on the German war machine. And every once in a while we also went up to bomb airfields, German airfields, and that was one of the touchiest jobs that we flew, because what we used normally a bomb load for all the other things were usually 500-pound bombs, but for the airfields they had a bundle of small, they were like oversized hand grenades, about this big. They had 6 sides on them, about that long, and they had the same type of arming device like a hand grenade where the lever flew up, it was spring mounted, and they were put together and held with stainless steel straps that held them in this bundle. And they had 144 of these with all of the arming parts against each other, so that they didn't go off. But when his bombs away, the straps released, and all these individual bombs started falling out, and then the arming devices would flip up, and they'd be armed for contact. And it wasn't unusual for one to hit the other, and they'd be exploding underneath you. But we would carry, I think, 10 bundles of those, so there's 10 times 144, pretty lot of bombs. And they did quite a good job of damaging the German airplane. As we dropped our bombs on the marshalling yard, just after the bombs went away, the airplane suddenly jumped in the air and shook all over, and loud noise. And back at the tail, I was wondering what was going on. And then over the intercom, turned out that we had received a direct hit. I think there's a slide there. Okay. Now, I expected that was probably either 105 or 125 millimeter shell, that hit. The bubble window is where the pilot was sitting, so you can see how close it came to taking him out. The tornado pulled up through the plane. It knocked off the plexiglass cover of the upper turret. It hit the one machine gun that's right in the back of the wall there. He was sitting in that turret. And it bent the machine gun into a 90-degree angle and took off the cooling valve and warning. And it also spun around the tower, the turret. And with probably a blink of an eye, if it had come a blink of an eye later, it would have taken off our whole left wing. So of all the places it could have hit, it probably was the least, the safest place as far as we were concerned. We brought that plane back, and it was junk the next day. So this now is plane number 3 that we and the Stars and Stripes photographer took that photograph, and it appeared in the Stars and Stripes newspaper. And he told us that they also sent it back to the United States. That it might have appeared over here, but that was where that photograph came from. So then, on March 12th, 45, we were leading the formation up to the target, and the target at this point it was in the Floresdorf oil refinery, which was right in Vienna itself. And one of the things interesting too, since I was a tail gunner, and there were oftentimes missions that were either close to 1,000 planes coming out of Italy or somewhere in that neighborhood. I had a front row seat looking backwards, and as far back as I could see, you would see planes, and then when they were too small, don't criticize me. I know they criticize the politician for taking it. Now I forgot what as far back as I could see, you'd see planes, but then when you couldn't see any planes at all, every once in a while you would see little sparkles of light where the planes were so far back that they're not invisible. But when the sun glinted off of the windshields of the planes, you could see just like little sparkles back there. And it was quite a sight to see. But anyway, getting back to the March 12th, 45, we dropped our bombs, and just as we dropped the bombs, it sounded like normally with the engine noise, we had the enclosed ear pads. It was fairly quiet; you couldn't hear anything. But all of a sudden, there was it sounded like a siren going on, and the plane started to vibrate and shake, and felt very strange. And I guess the pilot or co-pilot announced that we had a runaway engine. The prop pitch had changed to a very shallow pitch, and so the engine was really running away, and that's what was shaking the plane and making it sound like a siren. And the pilot and the co-pilot were working the controls to try to get it to stop it or change the pitch, and nothing was effective. And felt like the plane was going to get torn apart, but finally, because of the over-revving, I guess it burned out the engine, and the engine froze up. And now that we had the props were causing a lot of drag, and we started losing altitude, and we had to drop out of the formation. And we had, in all the missions before this that we had flown, we were never given an alternate airfield to go to. It was always to try to get back to Italy, but that morning during our briefing, they told us that we couldn't get back, that the Russians had retaken an airfield in a place called Pécs, P-E-C-S, in Hungary, and that we should head for that. So we started again to keep from losing altitude. We again started stripping out all of our guns and machine guns and everything we could throw overboard until we finally stabilized the plane that we were flying. We weren't losing altitude anymore, so we were heading for the field in Hungary there. And when one thing I have to interject is that we had a 12-man crew, because they oftentimes, you hear stories about we just went up and bombed cities. Well, for one, I know that our group in the 15th Air Force never went up and bombed cities. We went for very specific targets, and we were told they didn't want to waste the mission, and so they wanted to make sure that we bombed that oil refinery in Austria. So they assigned an extra navigator to our regular navigator, so they could cross-check each other and agree that, the course that was the correct one, and also that it was in the right place. And then we also had they had taken out the lower ball turret and replaced it with a radar dome. We had a radar set in there, and if we got over the target and it wasn't clear enough for a visual bombing, we were then bombed by radar. And that was another interesting thing. I'm going to sidetrack a little bit, because the German anti-aircraft guns used sight, if they could, for range and tracking us. But they also used radar towards the end, and then I think, in fact, they depended mostly on radar. And there were several times when we were flying on other missions, not this one, that we had a man who was an extra radio man who had a number of separate radio transmitters, and his job was to listen for the radar signals coming from the Germans below us, and then he was to determine the frequency that they were transmitting at, and then he would tune in one of his transmitters into that frequency to jam out the German radar. But I wonder whether that was also pinpointing where we were. But anyway, that's just an aside that might be interesting. When we got to where we dropped the bombs, like I said that, and we were, the engine ran away. We heading for Page, when we got to where we calculated was the right spot, we were in the clouds now, so using the sun to navigate by was out of the question, and the radar set had been damaged, so we couldn't use that to see where the ground looked below. So it was just plain dead reckoning. We started circling down, and we got to around, the pilot had told the navigator to call out he had a radio altimeter, and he said, call out the altitude 100-foot intervals. When we got to around 4,000 feet, we started to see the ground. And I was still back in my tail turret, even though I had no guns or ammunition. And I looked and I saw 3 fighters approaching us from 7 o'clock below. And I told everybody about that. And with that, though, we started getting all kinds of, anti-aircraft firing, including some of the smaller anti-aircraft fire besides the heavier caliber one. And we were really getting a lot of hits around us. The pilot ordered a bailout. And as I said, I was back in my turret when I turned around. There were 4 others who were in the waist section. The bombardier had come out of the nose. He was in there too, so they were already going out. And there was only one man left when I got out of my turret, and he was Art Colton, and he kind of, with his hands indicated he would wait for me to get around to the other side of the escape hatch, and I told him to jump out, and which he did, and I don't understand why, but for whatever reason, when he went out, the escape hatch came down, and when I got over there, I looked, and what I saw was his boot was between the frame and the escape hatch, and I didn't know what to do, because I didn't know whether he was hanging there, and whether he was maybe knocked out, and if I opened the escape hatch, he may not open his chute, and so I thought, I probably could hold that with one hand and open the escape hatch with the other, which I did, but he had fallen right out of his boot, and he wasn't there, so then I bailed out. And from knowing what it was like the first time, I now looked to make sure I was very clear of the plane, and I also free fell a little distance before I opened up my chute, and I saw several flak hits around the plane, and I saw someone else come out of the plane. And when I opened up the chute, I suddenly started hearing things going, and I realized that I was being shot at from on the ground. So I took my shroud lines and I started tugging on them so that I was spilling air from the chute, and that would make me, oscillate as I went down. But it also would make you fall faster. And in fact, a number of our crew were wounded, and three were missing in action eventually, and I'm pretty sure the good possibility was that they were shot on the way down, and that's why they never were picked up. And there were the engineer on our crew, Bill Taylor, was shot through his watch pocket, and it came out his backside, and he never, well, he was picked up by the Germans. He never had any medical treatment at all. They just gave our crew members a bandage to wrap around his stomach, and for a while he ran a fever a number of days later, but then I don't understand how it didn't hit any vital organs, you know, or any intestines or anything like that, but he survived. But anyway, getting back to myself, coming down, I saw that I was coming, there was a line of trenches in front of me and barbed wire, and I landed right in amongst all of that. There were mines, I think, too, and a man put his head above the trench, and he went like this, and I thought, well, he didn't take a shot at me, but he ducked down right away, and I quickly unhooked my parachute. I ran and jumped into the trench, and when I got in there, there were about 10 or 15 Germans with fixed bayonets, and the first thing I saw was the German eagle with the swastika on it, and the man who had stuck his head above the trench, he just put out his hand and he said, "Pistol." So I didn't make that noise when I did it. But anyway, I gave my pistol, and they never searched me. And I had around 50 rounds of ammunition in this pocket here, and they took me from the front lines there, and they assigned a guard to take me back from the front lines, and he could speak a little English, and he seemed like a kid. I was only, as I said, I just turned 20, but he seemed like maybe about 16 years old or something like that. And he said to me, usually POWs that I heard before said that the Germans usually said to him, "For you, the war is over." But he didn't say that to me. He said to me, "If you manage to survive for 6 weeks, you'll be a free man." And that was pretty prophetic, because the danger was for them 6 weeks were very much dangerous. Anyway, he took me back to a dugout, and where there was a German officer working at a field desk. He put me in there, and the German officer told me to sit down in the corner, and I was there for several hours until a nightfall started to come, and another guard then took me from there, and they still hadn't searched me or anything, and I'm trying to figure out what I can do with the ammunition in that pocket, and I want to get rid of it. So we started going back from the front line, and a number of German tanks were heading up to the front, and just as they got alongside of us on the road there, the one alongside of us burst into flames. I don't know what caused it, but the guard starts yelling, "Schnell, Schnell," and he started running, back towards the back of the line. And I went to step off the road, and he saw me do that, and he started screaming and pointing. And there was a sign there that had a skull and crossbones on it, said Achtung, M-I-N-E-N. So it was mined out, and anyway, I didn't step there. I made sure I didn't go in that direction. And we got to we were down where we landed was near the WWII River, and the Germans had stretched a rope across the river, and they had a flat bottom boat that they poled across the river with a long pole, and they loaded me on board of that. There's maybe about 5 to 10 other German soldiers going across, and I thought, oh, it was pretty dark by this time. This is a good place to get rid of that ammunition. So I reached in my pocket and I grabbed a handful, and I put my hand over the side of the boat as far as I could, but I couldn't reach the water. And I dropped them, and when they did, they plunked as they went in. They all froze and stopped pulling across the river, listening for more noises, and they didn't hear any. They started looking, and it took me 3 handfuls of glue, and each time they stopped looking for me. I got rid of them all and got across the river, and they took me to. I was now in Croatia, and they took me to the center of this town. I think it's, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but it's something like Donji Mihajlović. And it turned out that was the headquarters for that part of the German front. And what I found out back in 2004, 2005 is that what we had done is we had stumbled upon, there was the last German offensive in World War II. It was called Operation Spring in German, not in English, but Operation Spring Awakening. And it turned out that the commander of that was Sepp Dietrich. Now, I don't know if anybody, people know who Sepp Dietrich is, if the name rings a bell, but he was the one who was in command. Well, he was still commanding at that time Adolf Hitler division, which was an elite division, in Germany. And he was still commanding that, and that was the division that was involved in the Malmedy massacre. So they were the same ones that were, that were in the Malmedy massacre, that sort of were involved in that battle. And it started 6 days earlier, and both sides weren't expecting any help, so that's why they were both, firing at us. And going back to being, they took me to the headquarters. It was up on the second floor, this large building, and it was a big wide open space. There were a lot of desks with officers working at the desk and runners coming in and out. And they led me over to the one corner, and there was nearby was a pot-bellied stove with this glowing red on the outside, and an officer was laying down on a sofa, like they had in the old days when we were younger. It was kind of like that. I don't know if you remember those kind of sofas, but he was laying down there, and he was doing a questioning. There was an interpreter there, and they had me strip off all of my clothing, my shoes and everything. I was standing there naked, and that's the way they questioned me. The Dresden raid had occurred not too long before this raid here, and that was one of the questions he asked me, was whether I was involved in that raid. And I had never even heard of it at that time, because we didn't get as much news about what was going on at the time as we get normally. And I kept on giving my name, rank, and serial number, and he didn't seem very pleased with that. No matter what he ask, and he kept on getting more agitated. I guess he was using some German curse words, but I didn't understand what they were. And they finally said, what will you say when we say we're going to execute you? And I thought a little while, and I thought, well, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. There's nothing I can do about it. So I just gave my name, rank, and serial number. And they then told me to get dressed and took me downstairs and headed towards the brick wall. I thought, well, that's the end of this. And they turned and then went to the cross street and went down the street, went, I don't know, a little ways down there, and the rest of our crew had been captured. There were 5 others were in a house in there. They brought me in there and put me in there, and anyway, it was now paid. And I found one of the questions the interpreter was asked me was, they said I was lying when I gave them my name and rank, because they said, we know a captain was on board that plane. And however they found it out or knew it, I don't know, but our pilot was a captain at that point. It was kind of strange. I don't know, it was just a good guess or what. But anyway, from that point on now, I'm talking too long. We were bombed 3 times. In Regensburg, we were put on a railroad in a 48 boxcar, and we started coming back into Germany, and it was part of the retreating German army after they lost the battles there, and we got bombed 3 times. We could fight the first day out, we started at daytime, and we were strafed by 3 planes, and from that point on, we never traveled in the daytime. We just traveled. They would travel during night hours, and before dawn, they would disconnect the engine, hide that somewhere, and we would stay on the tracks right where we were. And then when nightfall came again, they'd hook up the engine and pull us a little bit further. We seemed to be zigzagging back and forth a lot of times too. Sometimes we wouldn't travel at all. We had very little to eat. Some days we had nothing to eat. There was one period of time we were living for a week or so on 4 crackers a day. The only time I remember having anything to drink is when we would stop near a river or somewhere, and they'd tell us to go down and take a drink out there. When we finally got to Regensburg, early in the morning, we found out we were in Regensburg, and we felt very uneasy because we had bombed Regensburg once or twice before, so we knew that was one of the prime targets. And sure enough, the air raid sirens went off, and the guards took us out of the car and took us to a quarry. And then the air raid sirens went off again. Nothing seemed to happen. And they took us back to the car, and about 15 minutes or so, airplane engines you could hear overhead, and the guards took off and left us locked in the car. And soon bombs started to fall around the car, and they had hold of the marching yard there, and we were locked in the car, and some of us said we had to break our way out of there. There's a little, there was an air window or space with iron bars, and at least that's how we looked out to see where we were. And we had been working on screws that held that into place. We had nothing planned, but it turned out when the bombs started to fall down, several of us decided we would see if we could get that window out of there. And some of the others said if we break out, that we'd get shot by the guards, and I figured, well, I'd rather get shot than burned to death in his car, so we pulled out the window, and one of the men, the car, we had our 6 crew members, another crew of 10 American airmen, 13 Bulgarian officers, and 1 Russian officer in one half of that 48 car. The other half, there was a barbed wire wall splitting the car, and the other half is where the German guards were. And the one man could fit through the opening, and when we dropped him down on the ground, he undid the wire that held the latch closed, and everybody left the car. There wasn't a soul left in there. We all ran to the same quarry, and the guards were already in, and they kind of gave us a sheepish look, but never said it did anything. And it turned out there were some German soldiers who had kind of Orient-looking facial features, and I wonder what they were. Well, the one member of the other crew could speak Polish, and he went over and started talking to them. It turned out that they were Russians who had defected. They were Cossacks who had defected to the Germans, and they were fighting for them. And they told them that there were 2 prongs of Allied troops on either side of where we were, and they said they'd like to surrender to have us surrender them to the Americans. And they said they would kill our guards for us if we'd go with them. And we kind of had a powwow, and we decided it wasn't the safest thing to do, because there were a lot of SS men in there, and they were just executing anybody who looked like they were going to defect, or they were defecting. So we told our guards about what the offer was, and they said, well, we're no longer their prisoners. They will take us to the nearest prison camp. And we spent several weeks on the road, and we finally got to Stalag 7A and got into that on a Wednesday, and then Sunday Patton came and freed the prison camp. It was April 29th, and so that was how we got free. And my mother had received now 5 months. She had received another miscellaneous. So anyway, I guess that's pretty much it. Unless anybody has any questions, we have some. Oh yeah, we. What's that? Yeah. Oh yeah. Do you have that video? Can you play a little video? Yeah, okay. I brought that piece of airplane back from the crash site. Back, not that time though. In 2004, the DPMO/JPAC, the group in Washington searching for missing personnel, is it ready for it? Tell me when you're going to start playing. They reopened a case for the one crew member, Charles Adams, because the grave registration teams had never located his body. And they contacted me. I was the president of our Bomb Group Association. And they came up and they got information from me. And because of that, we ended up, my wife and I went to Hungary, and we met Nandor Molhash, and he escorted us around from Thursday night until Monday night. And we went to the Danram where the plane came down. He arranged for a meeting with the mayor of Gordisha is where the plane came down, and the mayor, there was a TV crew came to the mayor's house, and there were two men who saw the whole incident, and we talked to them and questioned them, and I appeared on Page TV, and this is, I think, which. Okay.
Anything because it's in Hungarian.
Well, what that one that Joseph Kovacs was, I think 15 years old, and he was one of the things, the men who saw everything happen. And we went to the mayor's house of Gordisha, and we talked over there, and I brought a piece of that airplane, that long one standing up against the fence. I brought back a piece about this big on the airplane when we came back from Hungary. And what I've done with it is I cut off a section of it and had it divided up and sent to the other members of our crew, so everyone's got a piece of the airplane. And the piece I kept, and I decided that it would only get lost somewhere, and I thought the best place do with it was I brought it over to the Army Heritage and Education Center, and I donated it over there. So, anybody have any questions? I have some photographs and stuff up here. There's several books that my story was in. One of them was the PCN TV in their own words, and the other one is Ordinary Heroes. And there's a magazine, what do you call it, Aviation History magazine has a story about our return to Gordisha for picking up the airplane, and there's that article in there. And I have Stephen Amber's book, the Wild Book, because Stephen Amber approached me and he said he wanted to write a story about the 15th Air Force and the B-24, and I was the president of our Bomb Group Association, and so we sent out letters and everybody sent in stories, and it turned out that the story was primarily about George McGovern, because George McGovern was a member of our bomb group, and in fact he used to be in one of the planes in the back of us when we were going up to the target, but he and Stephen Ambrose were neighbors, and they used to go out to dinner together. And that was pretty much why that story was all about Stephen Ambrose. I don't know. Anybody have any questions or anything?
Well, first of all, Frank, thank you very much for sharing your experiences and serving our country. It's much appreciated. Yeah, this is normally a time we take some questions, but there's somebody, Laura, maybe could you take the mic back there? She has a quick announcement about bus trip, and we'll take questions.
I'm wondering when Patton and...
Could you just hold off a second? There's somebody back there who had a quick announcement that she wasn't here early on. Then we'll take questions.
We were here, we just didn't get a chance to get your attention.
I'm wondering if you were able to see Patton at all. Were you? Well,
Yeah, the answer to that is yes. He came in to into the prison camp in his Jeep and with his 6 shooters on his side and his friendly helmet. And he stood up and he gave a short speech. And then, very short, and then he said, I have to keep chasing those GD Germans, and off he went.
Anybody else?
Have you experienced any activity with German jets or rocket planes?
Well, the answer is, we were told that they were in the air, that they, there was a possibility, but we never did. In fact, the only place I saw him was when I was a prisoner, and we went by some of the German airfields, and I saw him on the ground, but I never saw him up in the air.
Anybody else?
Yeah, during your bombing runs, you never made any mention of having encountered German fighters or the occasion of you to fire at any of them.
No, okay, and the reason why was because the oil offensive that we were on was very effective, and the German fighters, there weren't very that many German fighters, but furthermore, the tactics had evolved of our own, and we were in fact we were told that we were being escorted a number of times by the Tuskegee Airmen. You know, they were down in our troop in our area, and we would never see them, because what they would do is they would sweep up ahead of us, and they would attack the Germans either when they were attempting to take off, or they would keep them pinned down on the ground. So it was a much more effective way, instead of waiting up around where we were, you know, and fighting them off up there. I hope I explained it to you.
Anybody else?
Yes, how did you ever meet the person who became Marshal Tito?
The Tito? No, I didn't. Never met him. No.
Were you guys Tito or Mikhailovich?
I was with the Partisans, which was Tito's. Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. If you have time, thank us that was really down here. I'll take a look at before we leave. Thank you very much. See you next month.
They're available right I know the Dorsey brothers. Not the Jordan brothers. Oh, that was after your family. Yeah, I had that right. We're staying up here playing.
It was a mess.
Yeah.
You ride now? Somebody told me you don't ride anymore.
Yeah, I know.
How do you get here?
Well, I don't get here. I haven't been here for a number of the things.
Give me your phone number. I told you. Oh. You didn't get to work. Yeah.